Whoa. We have been the whites upset. And we're on fire, as in ready, aim, fire. You come up, we dumb up. From Mansa Musa to Massa Yusa. Assertion of your humanity means exertion of your calamity. Your inability to stop us makes it your fault. Living while black is crime enough, but leading the vainglorious GOVT makes the whites of our eyes notoriously B-I-G. And you got one more chance to resign. It's in our scarcity design. Red bloodshed led by the bluest eyes. You were ready to die when you were ready to vote. And eyes not European eyes white. And you can't be white unless you are against the black opposition. No mirrors in privilege. Reflection is projection. Thou shalt not kill is a commandment, but I'm a Christian. Let the church say amen. A community meeting for the coup to be beating is held at the church where the imperial wizard will be greeting saying, amen. Don't shoot till you see the whites of their eyes or the blacks of their skin. If killing them is wrong, I don't want to be right. But how can I be wrong when the South was right and eyes white?
Welcome to Woke Podcast. On today's episode, we have Christopher Everett, who's the film producer of Wilmington on Fire. You don't want to miss today's episode. We go real in depth on the massacre that took place in Wilmington, North Carolina in 1898. The Wilmington Massacre was a bloody attack on the African-American community by a heavily armed white mob with the support of North Carolina's Democratic Party on November 10, 1898, in the port city of Wilmington, North Carolina. It is considered one of the only successful examples of a coup d'etat in the United States that left countless numbers of African-American citizens dead and exiled from the city. This event was the springboard for the white supremacy movement and Jim Crow segregation throughout the state of North Carolina and the American South. Wilmington on Fire gives you a complete historical and present-day look at the events, showing how the violent overthrow of an existing government not only cemented white supremacy in the city of Wilmington and the state of North Carolina, but also throughout the United States. Trust me, you do not want to miss today's episode. Please be sure to share it. Please be sure to follow Wilmington on Fire on all social media platforms and check out WilmingtonOnFire.com. You need to have this film. You need to share this within your community. If you have children or loved ones, you need to share it with them as well. This is a very important part of our history that does not get talked about, even if you are not someone from Wilmington, North Carolina. This is still our history. So tune in, sit back, and enjoy the pod. Peace. So Chris, so tell me a little bit about, who you are, where you come from, and how did you get into making this actual documentary?
Okay. Well, I'm from a small town in North Carolina called Laurinburg. I guess many of you listeners, they probably don't even know where the hell that's at. but it's about 2 hours from Charlotte, 2 hours from Wilmington, and about 40, 50 minutes from Fort Bragg, which is in Fayetteville, North Carolina. But, man, I just, I've always been interested in making movies ever since I was a kid. And then after I graduated high school, I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and went to school at King's College and studied graphic arts, graphic design. And then after that, I was 100 pounds lighter back then. And then I got into, acting and modeling. And so I was doing that for a few years. Then I moved down to to ATL, Atlanta, I say about 2007. And then once I moved down there, I didn't really get to do the acting stuff that I thought I was going to do. And then after that, I started kind of wanting to make my own projects. And, I started shadowing a few people, working on some, free student film projects here and there, little indie film projects here and there. I just kind of fell in love with it, man, of just having the power and control of making your own the type of films you want to make. And I did a small little fundraising documentary for a historical black boarding and day school in my hometown of Laurinburg called the Laurinburg Institute. And I did that filmed that from 2008 to 2010. And that was kind of like my first taste of some type of experience trying to do my own film. And then after that, I decided to take it up to another level and wanted to do another documentary. And then I kind of was researching on the internet and some other things like that, and I ran across the whole Wilmington 1898 massacre story. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was fascinating because, I grew up in North Carolina and grew up 2 hours from Wilmington. I never heard anything about it. And
wow.
Automatically, once I saw it and read about it, it made me think of John Singleton's Rosewood, and then also hearing about the Tulsa Massacre and stuff like that. And then I just started doing a little research and started reading some of the commission reports that are online that was commissioned by the state of North Carolina, and also started reading a few books on the topic as well. And I saw that no one actually did a full-length film on it, documentary or narrative. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna take this as a personal challenge, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to take the little bit of money I got and put it together, and we'll see if we can make something happen. And that's how, I got this whole thing started.
Wow. Yeah, and I viewed the film, high quality production, sound, colors, visuals, everything is top notch. Yeah. It didn't seem like I was watching the film from somebody who's only done a few small projects. It seems like you've been in the game for a decade or more with this film. It's a knockout film. I'm not even joking. Plus, it also has a really dope soundtrack to it too. So you crafted this thing from beginning to end, and I know you've been working on this film for a couple of years. Because I know when we first got connected online is when I heard about it, and I think I heard you on a Blog Talk Radio show, Tracy Gilmore.
Tracy.
This was like damn near 2 years ago or so. So you've been you've been putting this together for a minute. But man, I was blown away. I was blown away by this film. Tell us a little bit about what happened. Like, what happened in Wilmington?
Yeah. Well, Wilmington, man, back then, before the massacre happened, Wilmington was North Carolina's largest city back then. It wasn't Charlotte. It wasn't Raleigh. Wilmington was the place to be, and it was a thriving port city as well. A lot of trade going on throughout the city. And also what made Wilmington interesting was it was a majority black city back then. And you had a lot of African Americans that were business owners, teachers. Also, you had a lot of black folks who were police officers and firemen as well. But another thing that made Wilmington very interesting again was that you had a lot of black people involved in the political arena. You had black aldermen and all those type of things throughout the city. And the whole Wilmington situation went down was because pretty much was about white supremacy, politics, and power. And you really have to go back to the Civil War. And when you go back to the Civil War and you look at the people who actually were involved in the 1898 massacre, a lot of them fought for the Confederacy. A lot of them were colonels, majors, had officer ranking throughout the Confederate Army military. So a lot of that kind of stemmed from that. And they always called Wilmington the capital of the white supremacy movement after the 1898 massacre. But the whole massacre and coup d'etat, it was pretty much an overthrow of the government. They took over the government. They killed a lot of the black citizens there, including some white citizens who were allies of the African Americans in the city. And they just totally destroyed the whole town, the political makeup and everything. And over a 2-year period, the city that was once majority black transferred to a majority white city. And it hasn't looked back since. And right then and there, they established Wilmington as the capital of the white supremacy movement. And you just saw a chain of events that happened throughout North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, throughout the rest of the South, of this whole Jim Crow movement. And then by the 1900s, man, Jim Crow was just set throughout the whole state of North Carolina, and just pretty much set African Americans, years and years back, all the way up to, I guess, like the Civil Rights movement.
Yeah. And the film does a great job explaining that, documenting it. It ain't just, stories that were passed on from generation. Like, there was actual documentation that laid a lot of this out. which is just incredible. One of the things that you mentioned was the movie Rosewood, and I remember watching that movie. I was probably like maybe 14 years old, picked it up on some cheap DVD from Target or Walmart. It was just laying around, and I remember watching that by myself and just being like, damn, like, what the hell is this? Like, this movie was crazy. And that movie touches on so many different things, and as I was watching Wilmington on Fire, it reminded me so much of that movie, because it was just like, no, this actually happened, and it happened in more than one place. You know, oftentimes we hear about Tulsa, Oklahoma, but we had Wilmington, we had Rosewood, we had things that happened in New York. Like, this stuff that happened across the U.S. And a lot of these towns and stories don't have the lineage or the documentation to actually express what actually happened. So we have these types of towns and these situations that have happened all over. A lot of them are not documented. And,
exactly.
and what you said, go ahead.
I was just about to, I totally agree. And that's the thing, man, is that almost every year you find out new things about different massacres. I think one guy, he wrote a book, I think, about the Sloper Massacre. I think down in Texas, I think. And I think he released a book last year. It's like, and this other guy, he did a joint called Banished, a documentary a couple of years ago. And it was about 3 massacres that happened, I think, in Georgia and I think Arkansas. So these things, man, it was thousands of these type of events. You know, they call them, I guess, ethnic cleansing. They were calling it that as well. They call it like, race riots, massacres, ethnic cleansing. You know, those are the kind of the terminology they would use. But these type of things, man, they happen all over the U.S. So, they always try to make it seem like it's a down south thing.
Right.
But it's not. It happened everywhere, man, from top to bottom, east to west.
Yeah. Well, one of the big important pieces that was touched on pretty early in the film was this group that formed called the White Government Union. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the White Government Union?
Yeah. Well, the White Government Union pretty much was like a sort of like a secret political society in a way, like the Klan, but it was just more organized and structured. They had like a lot of your business people, your politicians, and things like that. Like the Klan were maybe, your local sheriff and a few, poor white folks. But the White Government Union, it was like the Klan, but that was more for your prestigious white folks. You know what I'm saying? Like people with stature, big money, politicians, business people, and like that. And they really did a lot of the behind-the-scenes work of really organizing this whole thing, because this wasn't just a thing that was restricted to Wilmington. They did the massacre in Wilmington, but this was a statewide white supremacy movement, because when they did the Wilmington Massacre, that set the example throughout the whole state of North Carolina that this whole state of North Carolina is going to be under white supremacy. And you had White Government Union chapters all over the state. You know what I'm saying? So it was a well-organized white supremacy movement, which was an outgrowth of the White Government Union. And we have the documentation, as you saw in the film. We got their actual constitution and bylaws. They got all that stuff of how they organized and the tips, the strategies and tools that they were going to use to regain power, not only in Wilmington, but throughout the whole state of North Carolina, and bring it back to white supremacy.
Yeah. When I heard, I've never heard of the White Government Union, and I'm just like, just the title alone just speaks volume on the dedication to organizing power, determining and maintaining and enforcing white supremacy. White Government Union. It's like these were not just regular white folks. These were folks that had put themselves in positions to make critical decisions, and they did it. They did it in unison, and they did it against the established government in Wilmington, and they formed forces. And then the other part of it was the redcoats, that they got kind of like these lower white class militia guys who were known for inflicting their hatred and bias. They played them, got them to, kind of join with them, played them to overthrow the whole Wilmington established government. I mean, I was just like, wow. And it didn't take long for them to make all this stuff happen either, which was just another mind-blowing.
Yeah, the thing is, see, they were planning and plotting this stuff for a few years. Because like I said, man, you had these type of massacres happen all over, especially like in places like South Carolina that are real close to North Carolina. But you had these type of things that were kind of building up. And I know one clip or one section that everyone really loves is the whole propaganda section by Dr. Umar Johnson.
Yep.
And he really breaks that down, man. See, they had a propaganda machine that was running nonstop for about a year and a half before they actually did the massacre. And it was pretty much, putting out all these stories about you don't want to vote Negroes in office, or Negroes in Wilmington are getting all these public, these political positions, which they weren't like that. They had a few positions, but not like to the extreme what they were saying. And they were saying that, black people making all this money, they're going to end up taking over, they're going to come after your women and your daughters. They were saying all those things and saying that we got to put a stop to this by any means necessary. Even if we have to kill them, you must do it. So a lot of the newspapers, the big newspapers back then, were white government union members. They were white guys, and they were actually members of the white government union. So a lot of them ran the whole propaganda throughout the whole state. And that really set the climate and the tone for when they did the massacre, and pretty much blamed, some of the African Americans for their own demise. And you even had a lot of black people back then that were actually blaming certain black people who wanted to stand up against all this racism and propaganda. They pretty much blamed them for it. And when you look at things like that, you see the same remnants of it today, when the victim always gets blamed, especially when it comes to our people. You see what I'm saying? Everyone else is blaming us for our situation, and plus we blame ourselves a lot of times as well. So it's like when you watch things like Wilmington on Fire and other films like it, you see that some has changed, but still a lot of things are still the same, especially how they use white supremacy and propaganda to really set forth their agenda.
Absolutely. One of the key figures in the film was Alex Manley. You had one of his descendants in the film as well. Could you talk a little bit about who Alex Manley was and why was he influential for this film?
Yeah, Alex Manley, man, whenever you look up anything about 1898, whether you're Googling it or whatever, Alex Manley's name always pops up. Like any of the pictures, like the picture of, you might have seen a picture of the burnt down building with the white man standing in front of it. That was his newspaper building. And that's like one of the main pictures of the massacre. And Alex Manley, man, he was an African American man. He was mixed. He could easily pass for white, but he never really wanted to be classified as white. He lived and he lived as a black man, and he was proud of it. He married a sister in Wilmington, and he started a newspaper called the Wilmington Daily Record. And it was pretty much the majority. It was a Republican type of newspaper. And back then, the Republican Party was more of your liberal type party. And a lot of African Americans were a part of that movement back then for the Republican Party. So he really was in favor and lockstep with Republican Party, things and politics and thus forth. And he was really into also creating, he wanted to have a viable business, no doubt, but he also used his newspaper to push for, equality and a political agenda for African Americans and the Republican Party as well. But the white supremacists, they needed something to really latch on to before they could actually do the massacre, like what I was saying about the whole propaganda stuff. So Alex Manley, he does an article, but there's always been a rumor that he didn't actually write this article, but it came out of his paper, so he had to take the blame for it. But Alex Manley did a rebuttal article he pretty much rebutted an article from this lady called Rebecca Felton. She was like one of the first female U.S. senators, and she did this speech back in 1897. It was actually a year before Manley wrote the article. And she pretty much was saying that, white men need to raise up. It's the end of, slavery is over with, and white women need to be out here protected by their white men. And, white women out here working on the farms with these black men and being raped at will. And it's the duty of white men to stand up and protect, white womanhood. And if you got to, kill as many black people as you can, just do it. So that's like a paraphrase. But
Mm-hmm.
So a year later, Alex Manley writes an article and pretty much criticizes Rebecca Felton's statement, saying that, you're totally wrong about your views about this whole situation, and that it's white men who are actually creeping, with black women.
Mm-hmm.
And he really exposed it. And he said also that a lot of white women are attracted to black men, especially mulatto black men as well. And then it's only when they get busted and caught they want to yell rape. You know what I'm saying? So when he wrote that type of article, they was like, okay, we're going to use this, and it worked because they plastered that article all over the state.
Yep.
And they had all these political cartoons that were, insinuating what Manley was talking about was real true, and white women want black men and stuff like that. So they just put it all over the state, man. And he was the first target when they actually did the massacre. They burnt down his newspaper building. Somebody tipped them off and told him that they were coming for him to kill him. So him and his brother jetted out of town, and they could easily get out of the area because they could pass for white guys. Everyone was looking for dark-skinned men, So they pretty much had to pretend white to even get out the state. You know what I'm saying? So they actually wanted to kill Manley, and the first act they did during the massacre was burn down his newspaper press. Then they just went all over the city, killing black people at will.
Yeah, wow. Manley, he's an interesting figure, and there was another person, I forgot to write his name. You had his descendant in the film as well.
Thomas Miller.
Miller, yep, Thomas Miller. And what they did, and a lot of the black people of the town of Wilmington, they really highlighted black excellence.
Yeah.
I mean, these people were not far removed from slavery at all. Like, this is literally 25, years or so, or a little bit more than that, years or so after slavery, quote unquote, ended, and these people have put themselves in a position to really be the lifeblood, quote unquote, of that town. Like you said, Wilmington was the biggest city in North Carolina, and they were instrumental. One of the things that was also touched on in the film was this idea of fusion politics, and I thought this was very important and key because can you explain a little bit what fusion politics is?
Yeah, well, the whole fusion movement came about around that time, and it pretty much was you had black Republicans, and you had a few white liberal Republicans and white farmers, and they all decided that we all need to join forces. We pretty much have some of the same needs and interests. Let's join forces and get the Democrats out of office. So they created this thing called fusion. And, fusion means kind of like they come together. You know what I'm saying? So that's where they kind of developed that type of term. They called it fusion politics. But they still ran under the Republican Party banner, but they just called it, the whole fusion movement. And they were able to get a lot of their people in office from the state level all the way to the local level. You had a fusionist governor. You had a whole fusionist government throughout Wilmington, especially, and it was a mixed government. And that's what also made Wilmington unique. It really just wasn't like a one-sided government. It was a mixed government. It was what the so-called New South was supposed to be in after the Civil War. That type of integration type of style. You know what I'm saying? Where you had black aldermen, you had like a fusionist white mayor. You had, black police department, black firemen. You had a good mixture, a nice little balance, per se. And the Democratic Party really couldn't stand that. And that's what the whole creation of the White Government Union came about. And it says that in their whole bylaws, Constitution bylaws, that they have to break up that fusion between the black Republicans and the white, populists, white farmers. And their whole movement was to bring those white people in the fusion movement back to the Democratic Party and back to white supremacy so they can make white supremacy whole again. And that was one of the reasons why the White Government Union was created. It was to break up that whole fusion politics movement because they knew that if all these people, the regular working class white folks and black people merged together like that and stood together like that, that they would have been unstoppable. You know what I'm saying? So that was one of the main reasons why they wanted to break up that whole thing. And they did. And, November 10th, 1898, they totally destroyed the whole fusion movement. After the massacre, there wasn't another fusion movement ever again in North Carolina.
Yeah, and that was very key, because the political system that we have now is I wouldn't say that it's 100% different. I would say that the labels have switched and things have gotten a little bit more confusing, especially for Black folks. One of the things that I get a lot of flack for is saying that we're probably the most politically ignorant people on the planet, African Americans, and there's a lot that we don't understand. And something like fusion politics, a lot of people will say, hey, that's what we have now. We have Black folks who, they're in office, and, we got people that we're working together with, not understanding that that's definitely not the system that we have now. And it also highlights the importance of all these people had a common interest, a common agenda. And the reason why they used the term fusion, it wasn't because they were together. It was because they had a permanent interest.
Exactly. Exactly. It was just your basic needs of life. Education. You know what I'm saying? Access to start a business. Access to get some land. You know what I'm saying? Just basic stuff. You still had, Black people still had their own neighborhoods, and white people had their own neighborhood. And they had that. But we're going to come together with political policies that we all have to benefit from. Because we all have kids. We all want our kids to get a good education and be something out here in the society. So, they just had those common interests, political-wise, politically, per se. They really weren't together like that, but for political purposes, political agendas, they were kind of lockstep in on the same thing. Right.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the undertones of the film and keys of the film to understand, especially for us, is that, when you have political interests, we can get a lot of things done. We can't just assume that people have our best interest at heart, because that's not necessarily true. And the whole reason, not the whole reason, but a huge part of the reason that the massacre happened is because white people were uncomfortable with the socialization with Black folks. Once they start saying, okay, these people are getting a little bit too much, power together. They're living together, and now they're having sex with our women, and some of our men are having sex with their women. That's when things got uncomfortable, because they felt like once that socialization happens, we're going to lose control over what we have, and that's a threat to white supremacy.
Exactly. See, that's the thing, man, because white supremacy, man, white supremacists, man, they look years down the road.
Yeah, absolutely.
They look what's going to happen 50 to 100 years down the road. And they saw that if we continue to let this happen, you're going to end up having pretty much a majority Black city all the way. Your mayor, the whole government is going to probably end up being Black 10 to 20 years down the road, everything. And then not only Wilmington, other places as well. They look at the big picture overall. A lot of times our people won't do that. We just look at right now, within a week's time, or within a month's time, what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. White supremacy looks at the whole picture, and they look 50, 100, 200 years down the road and how it's going to affect them. So they said, we got to put a stop to this right now by any means. And, they did everything, man. They rigged the whole voting system, which nothing ever happened to them, because they pretty much intimidated people who would have told on them. They said they would have killed them or burnt their business down to intimidate them. And then when that didn't work, they just did the massacre.
Yeah. Wow. Another very interesting part of the film, I don't want to give too much of the film away, but was the part with the local pastor of the church and how he was ran out of town and threatened. I thought that was very key too.
Reverend Jalen Kirk. Yeah, he's one of the first. I think he had the first actual written hand account about what happened. After he was ran out of town, he actually wrote about it, and he's kind of like documented as having the first actual experienced account of the 1898 massacre, man. And he just talks about all of it, the days leading up to it, because a lot of people kind of felt something was going on. When you look at when you read his stuff and a lot of other people's writings, They kind of sensed something was about to happen. They just didn't know it was going to go that far. You know what I'm saying? They thought it might just be a little rally or something like that. Some people, might get a little rowdy, and that's it. They didn't think that it was going to be a straight-up massacre, and they were actually banishing people and trying to kill people and taking people's property and all that. But, Reverend J. Allen Kirk, he talks about all that stuff, man, about, how you had even the white pastors participating in murdering people. And the lady that's in the film, Sonia Patrick, she talks about that, how you had the white pastors surrounding the church. They were involved in that whole white mob and trying to kill, that pastor of that church. But you have these white preachers preaching every Sunday about God and everything, right? But yet alone they're up here participating and actually praising the massacre, because you had a few white pastors after the massacre pretty much saying that this was God's will and this needed to happen to bring our city back, to restore our city. These are actual documented quotes from white pastors saying this stuff.
Yeah.
So, people like Reverend J. Allen Kirk, he survived the massacre and actually wrote about it. One of the first people to actually ever put something in writing about the whole experience.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. That was a very key piece of the film as well, because, especially now, we I mean, it's always been like this for us, because we've just been on a consistent threat and domination. But our go-to is always, well, we got to have faith. We got to forgive. Jesus and God, they're going to fix this for us. And we assume that the religions that we subscribe to, other folks or white supremacists subscribe to, and it's not the same thing. And we assume that our belief systems, our spirituality is going to be the only thing that's going to help us in our situation and help us overcome. But however, we have several examples that is not necessarily true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And see, the thing is, man, it's like, and, a lot of times people say, well, why didn't black people fight back during the massacre? That's one question I always get. Well, you had quite a few black people who actually tried to fight back, but they were just they were outarmed. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times they didn't really sell a lot of that ammunition or guns to black people back then, and also people got to remember that it was the actual military also involved in killing these black people here.
Yeah.
Because the red shirts, they were actually former soldiers that just came back from the Spanish-American War. You had the Wilmington Light Infantry. They just came back from the Spanish-American War, and they were all part of that whole mob that were going around killing black people. And that's, you saw the instances of they were using the actual Gatling gun, which was like the precursor to the machine gun. So you got people riding around the wagon shooting a machine gun. You can't compete with that.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? There's nothing you can do with your little gun you got.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? There's only so much you could do but just to run and get the hell out of town. You know what I'm saying? So they were really, you had black people who were courageous enough to try to fight back, but they were just outarmed, and just outnumbered.
Yeah, and that, I think that gun is important too, because that's still, is that in one of the museums?
No. This is the thing about this, right? They can now. They said they can never find the gun. There's rumors about where the hell it's at and everything, right?
Okay.
But hopefully in part 2 I can find the person who got it and we can see if they'll let me film it. But but yeah, they never really found the Gatling gun, so it's completely missing somewhere for many of years. But they actually have the rifles and everything like that they use.
Sure.
And I think that's in some museum or at the police station or something like that in their little museum vault. But yeah, the Gatling gun, no one really knows where that's at per se.
Yeah, but there is documentation of it though too. Yeah.
Yeah, you got the pictures. A lot of the pictures you see. I know one of the pictures you might see in the film where you got these guys standing on the wagon with the shotguns, and you see the Gatling gun in the back. Yep. Yeah, that's it right there.
I mean, and this is a prototype for a lot of the weaponry that we see now, like those big machine guns that are hosted on top of, military infantry vehicles. That's exactly what this was. So you think so for folks that aren't familiar with guns, think about next time you see a movie like one of those war movies where someone's, in the Middle East and they're shooting off a car. That's what they had in Wilmington versus the black folks that had, 6-round guns and things like that. Like there was no opportunity for them to compete with that.
Yeah. Yep. And like I said, man, all this stuff, this is military weaponry. You know what I'm saying? And these were military soldiers who were actually participating in the killing of black people. And see, that's what makes Wilmington's situation kind of unique than a lot of other ones, because, in the other massacres and race riots that we've had in the country, those were just regular civilians killing black people. This was a mixture. This was a regular white folk civilian, and these were actually military soldiers. Pretty much was the United States military killing their own citizens.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And power, wealth, and violence are kind of like the three running themes throughout the film. Because after the actual killings and things kind of ceased, we had a lot of displaced black folks, whether they were in hiding and running. A lot of folks just kind of hid out for a few days, and at night they would try to sneak back to their homes and gather as much as they can to get out of town. We had some upper-class black folks who were allowed to leave. I don't know how many of them it was, but they were actually allowed to get out of town, which is very interesting as well. And then you had just the slaughter. There's a lot of discrepancy on how many people died, which touched on in the film. Some documentation says 12 people. Other documentation says it could be anywhere between 51 to 100. Some people say it's even more than that. Can you talk a little bit about how that plays out and how that was spoke about in the film?
And see, this is the thing, man. I remember I was helping a research team do some stuff on the Tulsa Massacre, right? And I was working with this one historian, and he kind of broke down that whole thing of, in every massacre, they kind of don't give you the real figure. And this is how they only count, like, fatalities that they actually can record, or that the actual, I guess, people, the medical doctors and everything actually get to. They don't count the people, the hundreds of people who died in the cemetery from the cold. You know what I'm saying? Because they ran and hid. They don't count those bodies. They don't count the people who actually were running. They might have got shot or gotten hit with a bullet or two getting out of the city, and then once they got 10 or 20 miles out of the city, they just died. They don't count that. You know what I'm saying? So that's why the numbers have really always been, no one really knows. And then also you couldn't trust the newspapers back then, that they were reporting, a lot of the newspapers who were ran by the white supremacists were reporting that only 2 people were killed. And some of them actually reported that it was a black person that actually did the first shot, and that's why the massacre happened. So that's exactly, man. This is crazy. And so that's why a lot of people over the years they knew about the massacre, but they didn't know what really happened. And then a lot of people were told never to talk about it. Even when we show the film, we showed the film earlier this year, and this older black man stood up, and he was from Wilmington, but he didn't live there anymore, but he was born and raised there. And he said, this is the first time I actually had the courage to talk about what my parents passed down to me. And they always told me never to talk about this event, because if you do, you're going to end up losing your job. You might end up losing your life. That's how serious it was, man. And that's how deeply affected black people in the area of the black people who knew about 1898 and how it affected a lot of those families. That's how deeply impacted they were, man. A lot of them were scared to death, and they told their kids never to talk about it, and they told their grandkids never to talk about it, and vice versa. You know what I'm saying? And it went on and on and on like that, man. And that's why a lot of people never really knew what really happened until people started coming out, and they did the actual race riot report and developed the commission to finally talk about what happened. You know what I'm saying? Then they started getting descendants of the actual, grandchildren and stuff like that of, those firsthand accounts that were passed down. They started looking up different records and writings and stuff, and really found out that this wasn't something that just happened all of a sudden. You know what I'm saying? That this was a well thought out, planned white supremacy movement and attack on the black community in Wilmington.
Wow. Yeah. You know, as a therapist, that's what I do for a profession. I do mental health therapy. And, you know, it's not uncommon for when I'm working with people, black folks, that we don't know our histories. There's this tool that we use called a genogram, where we pretty much track your lineage. We'll start with yourself. If the person has kids, we'll add them. We'll go parents, grandparents. We'll try to go as far up as we can. And many of the black folks I work with, they stop at their grandparents. Some of them can go up to the great-grandparents. And if I work with white people, or just any other ethnic group outside of black folks, they can go, you know, great-great-great-grandparents.
Oh, yeah. They can go all the way back to whoever was the first to even come over here.
Yes, and it happens. And you know, that struck me right away, because when I learned how to do this technique in therapy, I did my own. And I'm like, damn, I can only go up so far back myself. And then on one side of my thing, I can just stop at my biological dad because I don't know nothing about him. And that's one of the issues that we as black people have. We always talk about we don't know our history. We don't know our history. We need to go back to Egypt and understand everything that happened on the continent. But we can't forget that we don't even know our own personal histories very well.
Exactly.
So it's very hard for us to understand our collective histories when we can't even figure out our own family stuff. And I believe the reason is what happened with a lot of the folks from Wilmington is there's so much pain. We have this legacy of suffering under white domination that people just really want to forget a lot of this stuff and not bring it up because it's so damn painful.
Yeah. And I ran into that a lot, man, when I was first getting this thing together some years ago. I ran into that a lot. Either you run into it where I remember, man, this one person was telling me that they had found like an old box of old photos, right? It had like a whole bunch of pictures of like black firemen, black police officers, all like back in like 1880-something.
Wow.
Right? And the family just threw the box outside. It's like, like, why did they do that?
Wow.
You know, that's history right there, you throw it away. And I've noticed that with a lot of our people that a lot of the African Americans that I talked to, a lot of them didn't really have a lot of documentations and stuff. Like a lot of that stuff was in the museums or whatever like that we had to find. But I noticed with the white side of things, like these white families who were actually involved in the massacre, they actually preserved a lot of the records. Even though it's all about white supremacy, they still preserved it. Either they donated to the library or some type of museum or something to digitize it and preserve it for over 100 years. But I noticed with our people, we never really do that. And a lot of times, a lot of the history gets lost when you don't really do that. And that's one of the things I want to start, man, is like a good archive in Wilmington, a black archive where people who have things and they're thinking about throwing them away, bring them to us so we can preserve it and research it and study it. You know what I'm saying? Because a lot of these records, man, that's how you can get some of these old properties back that were stolen. You know, these old records and deeds. And you want to keep these things because you can actually help black people who actually gotten property stolen. We're actually going to put that in the second one. I got a guy in the film. He actually got someone's property back like that because he found a discrepancy in like one of the old deeds, and he got this one brother his land back. I think the land was worth about close to $1 million.
Damn.
Got it back.
Wow.
And see, those are the things I want to do, man, when I start this archive thing, is to collect not only stuff like that, but just everything, all this history. But yeah, you're right though, man, about the whole personal, our own personal history. A lot of us don't, we don't know because we don't really pass those things down, or things have happened that we just like, oh well, forget it, and that's it.
Right.
So.
Which is a traumatic response. So it's easier to just keep moving forward, duck your head down, not think about the past because it's too traumatic. Wow. Yeah, I was gonna save some of the film because I got so many questions. The film is so great. I didn't want to say everything, but the whole property thing was that was deep. But I'm gonna let folks actually see the film to check that out.
Cool.
I think that's a huge key to what happens and why we don't have a lot of legacy and we don't have a lot of wealth is because stuff was legit stolen, taken by force. I mean, and the film highlights that very great. So I'm gonna leave it right there. I ain't gonna talk too much about that because you have to see this film, man. Man, I was excited after watching. I mean, I was hurt because of what happened, but I was excited because this is the story that needs to be told. Before I connected with you online, I had no idea about Wilmington. Never heard of it.
Yeah.
I've heard of Durham. I've heard of Charlotte. I've heard of all those because of the basketball programs and universities they have there. But other than that, never heard of Wilmington. Didn't know that it was the biggest, city in North Carolina. Didn't know none of that history. And I think that this film is really a highlight to what has happened throughout the United States, because I truly believe that this has happened across the United States. Probably in every state, there's been a community or a town like this. Here in the Twin Cities, we've had two towns like this that have had similar versions of this, but not quite massacres, but just the governmental, strategic moving and displacing people by force. That has happened across the globe.
And see, that's what people got to realize, man, is that, it's Black history all around you, because back then, as a black community, you had to start your own thing. You know what I'm saying? So every city had some type of Black district or Black business district, because you couldn't go nowhere else. So Black people had to create something of their own, and that's why you had a lot of Black enclaves of little business districts or little towns and everything in every state, almost every city. Because, we had no choice but to do for ourselves. You know what I'm saying? So it really didn't matter how small the place was or how big the place was. There was always some type of Black district in a certain city throughout America.
Right. And it was ours. We owned it. And that's one of the key things is ownership. And even with yourself, with this film, this is ownership. This is you taking, the area of media and you're owning it, which is important, and we have to support you. So we have to support you. I've heard you throughout the interview say there's going to be a second film, which is great. We have to support that one too, because this is important. This is our history. Even if you're not from Wilmington, if you're not from North Carolina, hell, if you're not from the United States, this is what has happened to our people historically, and we have to know this, because this is why we're in a situation that we're in now, is because we've had all our excellence gutted from us, legit gutted, just taken.
And that's the thing, man, is that we definitely got to support, artists that are, courageous enough to tackle these topics and really put them out there and do it at a quality level. You know what I'm saying? And also, I've had certain backlash so far, of doing the film. But it's been coming from a different place that I didn't expect it from. It's been coming from, from my own community sometimes. Where, I've had people say, he's making all this money, which I'm not. You know what I'm saying? And the little money I make, it goes right back into the film and to do the second one. You know what I'm saying? But my thing, if I was, so what? It's a business.
Right.
But I'm not making like all this money, which they claim I am. But my thing is, we make it seem like it's something wrong if I was.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, that's just like going to a business person with a store. That's like me going to Walmart and saying, man, you're making all this money. So.
Right.
I'm gonna talk bad about you and say don't go to this store no more because he's making all this money, he's robbing the community, all that stuff. But I've actually had people do that.
Wow.
And spread rumors about me, saying that I'm robbing the community. I don't see how I'm robbing the community when someone purchases a ticket.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
Just like you go to the movie theater to see Batman versus Superman.
Right.
You
right.
pay $10 to get a ticket. How's that robbing the community?
Right, and we'll have one Black character in the film.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't get that, man, but, that's the thing, man, because, I don't know. It's weird, but you just got to ignore it, and you just got to just continue to do, what you do, and, and still try to do it for the people. And I've done several things on the low, man. I don't even talk about that. I've done a lot in the Wilmington community. I don't even live there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But I still try to do things and try to support certain organizations and certain things, initiatives. But I do it on the low. You know what I'm saying? So, it is what it is, man. But I'm going to keep moving forward and do what I got to do. But everyone, I just want people to just support the film, man. WilmingtonOnFire.com. They can check that out, for whenever we're going to be screening and also when we're going to release the DVD and everything in November.
Yes. And you can give out the date. When's the actual date, release date?
November 10th. And the reason why I'm picking November 10th, because that's the actual day of the 1898 massacre. And November 10th is going to be the day that the DVD and the digital download and stuff like that will be available for purchase. So, it's going to be available on Amazon and also WilmingtonOnFire.com. But pre-sales are probably going to go on probably like beginning of October when we start pre-selling it. So,
all right, sounds good.
So everyone just log on to WilmingtonOnFire.com or just check us out on Facebook.com/WilmingtonOnFire, and you can keep up to date with everything.
Yeah. And I would encourage everybody, once again, even if you're not from Wilmington, it doesn't matter. You need to check out this film. This film just lays out what happened so beautifully, and it gives you your history. You may not have been from Wilmington. Your people may not have been from Wilmington, but this is your history because this has been done across the board, man. And it's a great film. Like I said at the beginning, just production-wise, I have a background doing some films, and what I've seen, color, sound, angles, all that is dope. It's dope from beginning to end. Great film, and I highly encourage people to check it out. I'm gonna buy a copy. If I can get enough interest from people up here, I would love to do a showing too.
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah, just let's stay in touch with it. We'll try to make something happen.
Yeah, and also I'd like to have you back too once the film's released. Yeah. Probably mid-November, so let things kind of roll through just to talk about what's going on and see what's going on with Wilmington on Fire Part 2. So, but yeah, this is important. This is very important for folks to understand. One of the things that I'm very proud of is that our history has kind of been a new form of interest, and it's been done right with your film, with folks like Tariq Nasheed and Hidden Colors, 7 a.m., which is a great film. Like, we're actually paying attention to things that are, very important to us. Now, granted, we still got a lot of escapism. We still got a lot of folks that, they want to talk about Gabby Douglas's hair and stuff like that. But at the same time, we do have an interest in what's important and understanding how we got to the situation that we're in, what we're going up against, and what we got to watch out for in the future. Because one of the things I got at the end of the film was, as black people, if we're going to develop any amount of power, we must be able to organize, we must be able to maintain that power, and we got to protect that power, because that's exactly what happened in this film. People were in position to organize. They maintained what they had. They put out that propaganda for a year. They set it up beautifully to just destroy, and then they protected it. And then they've been running the same game since 86? Yeah, 1898. Yeah, I got my numbers all mixed up. But yes. So, but yeah, it was, wow. It's a great film. Any final things? Anything you want to leave the audience with?
Oh man, just I guess, man, whoever's listening, I'll be screening, because I know you probably got people listening all over. So I got a couple of screenings coming up. Like, if anybody's in the North Carolina area, I got 3 screenings happening in September. September the 15th through the 18th is the North Carolina Black Film Festival in Wilmington, North Carolina. I'll be screening on one of those dates during the festival. Also, September the 15th, I'll be screening at the Film Spark Film Festival in Raleigh, North Carolina. They can check that out there. And also, I'm setting up a screening right now in Fayetteville, North Carolina, for probably September 24th. So, so anybody that's listening in the North Carolina region area that listens to you, they can check out, the screenings, those 3 screenings of the film in September. And they can just always go to WilmingtonOnFire.com, check out anything. Also, Facebook.com/WilmingtonOnFire to stay up to date with everything.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Thank you again, Chris. Really appreciate it. Definitely want to stay in contact. This film is so important for everybody to see. Yeah, and that's it.
Well, thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
I'm one of the regular people, guy. Why we ain't got no voice? It said the mix shall inherit the earth, pimp. Listen, man. I was born in a city, a small little city with limited options. So now I'm torn between lyrics and what Diddy would sponsor. From feeling like a pig in a forest to being chased by pigs in a tourist. you fresh to death. You're meant in a coffin. Plus, if you're important, you can get it imported. They say I look like a dude that was given a fortune, but I move like a genius that lived as an orphan. Shouty say when I hit it, I hit kidneys and organs. Hey, don't cue that fat lady pimp and give me some organs. That's that American pie. I'ma give me your portion. That's how Americans drive. I'ma give me your Porsche. So if you care to reply, I'ma go Christopher Wallace and bury you guys with the same thing Biggie was talking. Dumb rappers need teaching. Escort you off the premises. My presence is something you will be.
Thanks for tuning in to the Woke Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Jones. Be sure to check us out on our website, wokepodcast.com. You can follow us on Twitter at The Woke Podcast, or you can follow me on Twitter at Universal Jones. If you have any questions that you would like to ask, if you have any guests that you would like to come on, or if you would like to be a guest on the podcast, feel free to hit me up. Remember, www.wokepodcast.com. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Be sure to share the podcast with someone you care about. And be sure to tune in once a week for that heat. Peace.